In my experience with mainstream Christianity, there has been a common understanding that the physical body is not inherently sinful. However, passages like Romans chapter 7 suggest a lack of trust in our physical bodies and the idea that one day, we will be delivered from them to enter the spiritual world. This creates a paradox, implying that while the body itself is not sinful, there is also an element of sinfulness. The issue becomes even more complicated. If the body is not considered sinful, then physical pleasure should not be seen as a sin. However, most denominations consider it a sin to look at someone with lust, even though Matthew chapter 5 verse 28 states that looking with lust is tantamount to committing adultery. Adultery is the same thing as being unfaithful to one's spouse, so how can someone who is not married be considered unfaithful when they look with lust? If looking with lust is a sin, what are we to make of all those scriptures in the Old Testament that assure us sexual desire is not sinful? The confusion among Christians about the physical body stems from the fundamental Christian doctrine of the sinful nature, which can be summarized as follows. While the physical body is not considered inherently sinful, it is believed to be influenced by sin due to being born with a sinful nature. With this in mind, I have a question. Can you, as a professing Christian, genuinely appreciate your own body? As Christians, our primary longing should be for the spiritual realm rather than the physical world. This perspective stems from the idea that the spiritual is eternal, while the physical is fleeting and destined for destruction. Therefore, it prompts the question of why we would find joy in the physical world, knowing that it is transient and will be replaced by a new heaven and earth. If the answer to my question is no, I wonder how your self-confidence and self-image are faring. I have had personal experiences that have shown me how damaging it can be to one's self-confidence and self-image when someone teaches you to hate or dislike your own body. From a very young age, my parents instilled in me the belief that I would never be handsome enough or have a good enough body to be considered normal by societal standards. This way of thinking was further ingrained when I became a mainstream Christian, as the teachings often reinforced the notion that we are longing for a new heaven and a new earth, free from our current sinful bodies. As a result, there have been many years of my life where I have experienced a profound sense of loathing towards my own body. How can it be deemed morally objectionable to harbor feelings of disdain or neglect towards our bodies, especially when our physical nature often struggles to align with moral principles due to the impact of our sinful inclinations? Are we not instructed in the Bible to refrain from relying excessively on the flesh? The interpretation of the Bible depends on how you approach it. If you read it as a Christian living in the year 2024, in a culture heavily influenced by Greek Hellenism, it may seem reasonable to conclude that the Bible teaches us not to value our physical bodies. This interpretation is based on the belief that we are spiritual beings temporarily living in the physical world. Still, our true home is in the spiritual realm, not in the physical world, because the physical world will one day be destroyed by God with fire. Therefore, we should concentrate on nurturing our spiritual selves to prepare for our journey to heaven rather than indulging in the pleasures of the physical world. This interpretation is derived from the biblical instruction not to love the world, which is understood as not being attached to worldly desires and pleasures. If you were to read this as a Jew living in biblical times, in a culture that has not been exposed to Greek Hellenism or figures such as Socrates and Plato, it would seem reasonable to conclude that the Bible teaches us to value and appreciate our physical bodies and our appearance because the Bible states that we are made in the image of God. Yes, we are still spiritual beings, but we did not end up here accidentally. We belong in this world, and we have been sent to it to repair it so it can return to its original glory as Jehovah, our God, intended. Therefore, we should concentrate on nurturing our physical selves to rebuild our bodies and the world around us so that the kingdom of Jehovah can one day return to a restored earth and establish his kingdom from Jerusalem. If we read the Bible this way, we would love the world and everything physical we see, including humans in their various forms and shapes, as we recognize that every human being, regardless of their appearance, is made in the image of God, and everything physical is God's creation. Disregarding or feeling contempt for the physical or believing we are damaged by sin would be the same as showing disregard and contempt for our God, our Creator. Which of these two ways of reading the Bible do you believe is the correct way? If you are a mainstream Christian, your answer is the first one, where we are taught to hate our bodies and everything physical. You can give me examples from the New Testament, such as scriptures from Romans chapter 7, which clearly state that our bodies cannot be trusted. However, it is essential to consider that Greek Hellenism was not a part of mainstream Christianity until several hundred years after the death of Paul. The New Testament did not exist as we know it today when Paul wrote his letters. If Greek Hellenism, with its duality between the physical and spiritual, was not a part of mainstream Christianity in Paul's day and the New Testament as we know it today did not exist, then the first way of reading the Bible is an impossibility. Why? Everything Paul wrote has to be understood within the context of the Old Testament, the Bible that Paul read, as a backdrop. We find countless examples in the Old Testament that indicate we are to love our bodies, and the fact that we all come in different shapes and forms is something to be appreciated because that is how God has made us in His image. The most important reason to read the Bible as a Jew living in biblical times is this: the concept of the sinful nature did not exist when Paul wrote those letters. Nowhere in Paul's culture and day in Israel do we find anyone who believed that we were born with a sinful nature. However, many years after Paul in Greek philosophy, Christian bishops mixed Platonism with the Bible and came up with the idea of the sinful nature. Therefore, if the sinful nature was an unfamiliar concept for Paul, we need to understand that we must read Romans chapter 7 in a new way. I don't know about you, but I am grateful that the Bible was not written to me but for me. This means that I have divine permission to appreciate my body and everything physical I see, including all my fellow human beings in their different shapes and forms, as we are all made in the image of God.